A story about finding meaning can start anywhere, but this one begins with a question. Any snipers? It becomes an emotional life journey when the quietest woman on the field steps forward, and what she discovers inside herself changes everything. In this mysterious self-discovery story, every choice pulls her closer to a truth she's spent years running from. The desert light always felt intrusive to Sophie Sink, as if the sun leaned too close, studying her with a curiosity she hadn't earned. She stood at the edge of the operations yard, the wind carrying a slow braid of sand around her boots, and reminded herself that anonymity was a blessing. She'd spent years cultivating it, the skill of being present without being seen. But that morning, the quiet broke. It began with a voice that didn't belong to the heat or the dust or the unending hum of generators. Any snipers? The words rolled across the compound like a ripple of tension. They came from General Marin, whose voice normally traveled with controlled force. But today, it held something else, a hardness sharpened by frustration and a question pressed into a corner. Sophie didn't move. She kept her eyes on the ridge in the distance, a faint silver seam under the sun. She wasn't a sniper anymore. Not officially. Not since she'd walked away from the certification she once aced without effort. These days, she catalogued equipment in a quiet room behind the comms tower. She delivered ammo crates. She repaired broken gear, tasks with edges dull enough to avoid drawing blood. But inside the command tent, everyone else shifted. 13 of the base's marksmen had tried to hit the armored scout vehicle stationed 4,000 meters away, and 13 had missed. Not because they were incompetent, because the shot was nearly fictional. Desert mirage warped the air like melting glass. Crosswinds braided in unpredictable patterns. Distance alone made error inevitable. Yet the ridge mattered. That vehicle mattered. What it relayed, what it watched, what it threatened, it all sat outside of reach, taunting them. Any snipers? General Marin repeated. His tone scraped across the sand and found her, though he hadn't noticed her standing there. No one did. That was her talent. That was her shield. Sophie exhaled slowly through her nose, trying to release the pressure inside her chest. She'd spent months avoiding this exact moment, avoiding the pull of old instincts. She'd locked the rifle part of her brain behind, a door she swore she'd never open again. The murmurs from the tent grew louder. No one left. Sir, all 13 tried. Shots beyond feasible range. Winds impossible today. Sophie's pulse tapped against her neck, slow, steady, disobediently alive. She stepped back, as if distance could save her from temptation. But the problem with instincts is that they don't die when you want them to. They wait, patient as shadows. She turned slightly, enough to glimpse inside the tent. The sharpshooters sat slumped or pacing, hands restless with the weight of failure. Charts, wind maps, and trajectory projections lay scattered on the table like abandoned attempts at solving an unsolvable riddle. But Sophia saw something different. Tiny inconsistencies, missed factors, patterns no one seemed to notice. The wind wasn't impossible, just layered. The ridge wasn't unreachable, just misunderstood. And the shot wasn't fictional, merely unforgiving. Her throat tightened. She didn't want this. She didn't want the attention, the responsibility, the possibility of being seen again. But she also didn't want the hollow ache in her chest, the one that always came when she ignored something she was born to do. Anyone, I'll take a volunteer, the general said. A brittle silence followed. Sophia felt her fingers tremble, not with fear but with recognition. The quiet, terrible knowing that purpose was calling her by name. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat when she opened them. The world hadn't changed, but she had. Before her mind could argue, before memory could stop her, before the past could drag its claws across her, Resolver Sophia stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a fault line shifting, sir. I can try. Every head turned. Every conversation froze. Every doubt sharpened into scrutiny. Sophia felt the weight of their stares. But more than that, she felt the weight of her own heartbeat, a steady, quiet drum that said, "It's time." General Marin stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You?" he asked. Not mocking, not dismissive, but stunned. Sophia nodded once, calm, steady, composed, on the ridge. The armored vehicle shifted slightly, its metal catching sunlight like a challenge. Sophia inhaled deeply, and for the first time in years, she let the door inside her mind unlock. This shot would change her life, but not in the way anyone expected. If you're into emotional storytelling, faceless YouTube stories, or life-meaning narratives, stay with this journey. The walk to the firing platform felt longer than it had any right to be. Each step pressed a quiet question deeper into Sophie's ribs. Why now? Why break the silence you've lived so carefully inside? The desert wind answered with grit against her cheek, a reminder that meaning rarely arrives politely. Sometimes it scratches you awake. Behind her, soldiers whispered. She's logistics, she barely talks, she's never been on a long-range roster. All true, all irrelevant. Sopiha kept walking, but someone else was watching her. Someone who knew exactly who she used to be. Sergeant Kel Brenner stood near the Combs Tower, arms crossed, jaw locked tight. He recognized the way she walked, a measured, spine-aligned, breath-sensed rhythm only elite marksmen carried. You couldn't erase that, not even if you tried hard enough to disappear. Only he knew why she'd quit. Only he feared what waking that part of her might reopen. He didn't call out, he didn't stop her, but his eyes followed her like a warning the wind couldn't carry. Sopiha stepped onto a platform, but the rifle lay waiting on the padded rest, cold metal gleaming beneath the harsh sun. It wasn't her rifle. Hers had been dismantled years ago, each part cleaned, wrapped, and sealed away in a locker she refused to open again. But all rifles told similar truths, and this one felt like a truth she'd tried to long to avoid. She knelt slowly. The world narrowed. Her hearing sharpened into structured layers, the hiss of wind against canvas, the low hum of the generator, the restless breaths of a dozen soldiers behind her. But beneath it all was the quiet. She depended on the quiet she feared, the quiet where memory lived. She pushed it back. Focus first. Few later she adjusted the rifle but against her shoulder, finding the pocket where recoil would land softly. She angled her cheek just so, letting the scope meet her eye like an old friend, who still remembered her name despite the years apart. Her breath entered. Her, measured, thin, controlled, the ridge sharpened into clarity. The target sat between two sun-bleached boulders, its metal hull reflecting the desert light like a shard of bone. It wasn't just distant, it felt unreachable, the kind of distance that humbled even the proudest shooter. The mirage shimmered, air-bent, wind shifted in upper layers she could only feel through instinct, not instruments. Yet the longer she stared, the more the impossible began to take shape. Patterns emerged, angles aligned, variables whispered their secrets. This shouldn't have been possible, but for her, impossibility always had edges she could grip. Behind her, the general cleared his throat. Sink, he said, using her last name like an anchor meant to test her weight. No pressure to prove anything. If you're unsure, I'm not, she said. It wasn't confidence. It was clarity. General Marin blinked, as if thrown off by the finality in her voice. He stepped back, her breathing steadied, her pulse slowed, then synced with the rhythm she'd learned years ago, from a man whose absence still lived in her bones. Her father's voice returned, soft and steady, the memory warmer than the desert sun. Patience before precision. You don't fire a bullet, you release it. She blinked away, the sting rising behind her eyes. Not now, not here. She adjusted windage, elevation, mirage, compensation, barrel temperature, humidity, the micro-tilt of the earth between her and the ridge. The soldiers whispered again, but she didn't hear them. The world was already narrowing into a single line, a single breath, a single impossible shot. Her finger settled lightly on the trigger. The moment stretched thin, and then a voice behind her ripped through the air. Every head snapped toward the Combs Tower. It was Brenner. His face was pale, his breath sharp, and the look in his eyes wasn't doubt, that it was fear. Asterisk, if you love faceless emotional storytelling, life-meaning narratives, and slow-burn suspense, don't miss next part. Asterisk. Sopiha didn't lift her eye from the scope, didn't turn, didn't flinch, but the air around her changed, tightened as if the desert itself leaned in to hear what Brenner was about to say. He stepped closer, boots thudding against the wooden platform. General, she can't take this shot, he said, voice trembling with a conviction that carried old wounds. She shouldn't even be here. Marin stiffened. Explain. Brenner inhaled sharply, a breath pulled from a place too deep to be casual. Sopiha Sink was the best long-range candidate we ever had, he said, but she never finished certification. She walked out, because Kel Sopiha said quietly, don't. He ignored her. She walked out because her last shot, the one she never talks about, his voice cracked, hit someone it wasn't meant to. The words dropped like a stone into the room. The soldiers behind them shifted, unsettled. General Marin's tone sharpened. Is this true? Sopiha slowly removed her eye from the scope. Her face remained calm, unnervingly calm, but something underneath it flickered, like a flame struggling for oxygen. Double quotes. Yes, she said. The single word softened the air and tightened it at the same time. Brenner stepped forward, desperation bleeding through his voice. She shut down after that, stopped shooting entirely, requested logistics duty. She hasn't touched a precision rifle in years. General, this isn't about skill, it's trauma. If she misfires again, I won't, Sopiha said. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried force, conviction, a quiet truth. General Marin looked between them, weighing urgency against human cost. He opened his mouth, but Sopiha spoke first. Cal, you weren't there when I pulled the trigger. You only saw the aftermath. You don't know what I saw through the scope. Her eyes dimmed, shadows pooling in them, and you don't know what I've carried since. Silence burned between them. The soldiers behind them held their breath, suspended between sympathy and fear. Brenner lowered his voice. You don't have to do this. Not again. Not like this. Sopiha turned back to the scope. Her heartbeat steadied. I have to, she whispered, because last time, I fired without clarity. This time, I can see everything. The general stepped closer, searching her face for any hint of instability. What do you see? Sink, he asked quietly. She exhaled. The truth, she said. The wind path, the mirage bend, the timing between thermal layers, and the shot I didn't take the day I quit. Her finger touched the trigger again, soft, precise. Brenner's face tightened with helpless frustration. Sophia, you're not the same person you were then, I know, she whispered. That's why I can do this. She looked through the scope again, and this time, something shifted inside her. Old fear loosened, old pain untangled, old memory stopped clawing and finally sat still. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't haunted by what she'd lost. She was guided by what she still had. A breath, a line, a purpose. She inhaled slowly through her nose. The world steadied. General Marin said nothing. Brenner said nothing. The soldiers behind her didn't move. The desert held its breath. She aligned the shot, finger tight. Warning alarm blared across the compound. Everyone jerked up. The armored vehicle on the ridge had moved. Not slightly, not subtly, that it was turning directly toward their base. The moment the vehicle shifted, something inside Sophia snapped taut. Instinct before thought, clarity before fear. She didn't lift her eye from the scope, didn't need to. Every sound around her sharpened into a layered hum, the way it always had in the moments before a decisive shot. General Marin shouted orders. Soldiers scrambled. Brenner cursed under his breath, but Sophia stayed still. Through the scope, she watched the armored vehicle pivot its barrel toward the base, a slow, inevitable gesture of threat. Heat rippled across the distance, warping shapes, but the outline of a mounted weapon system was unmistakable. This wasn't surveillance anymore. It was preparation. The shot wasn't optional. It was survival. Her mind dropped into calculation mode, the state she had avoided for years, the one that frightened her because of how natural it felt. Upper wind layer, shifting west. Lower wind, nearly still. Mirage, bending at a steeper angle. Vehicle elevation slightly higher than expected. Time left seconds. Behind her. Brenner stepped forward as if he could physically stop her. Sophia, this is exactly how it happened last. No, she whispered, steady. Last time, I doubted. This time, I don't. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Breath out. The world narrowed. Release. Don't fire. She squeezed. The rifle cracked. Violent and beautiful. The recoil pushing against her shoulder in a familiar, almost intimate rhythm. Dust leaped off the platform. A shock of silence followed. The bullet sliced through the desert heat, curving through invisible layers of wind, carving an arc so improbable it bordered on impossible. She tracked it by instinct, not sight, feeling the shot rather than watching it. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, an explosion of dust and metal erupted on the ridge. The vehicle lurched. Smoke, sparks, silence, but not destruction. Sopiha's breath hitched. She'd hit it, but not the right place. The weapon system still moved, still alive, still targeting the base. Brenner's voice broke behind her. Panicked. You missed the core. General Marin shouted. Toward comes. Brace for impact. Sopiha's pulse hammered. She'd never taken a second shot in her life. One shot was the rule. One shot defined the moment. One shot ended the story. But now she was out of time, out of distance. Out of doubt. She chambered another round. For the first time in years, her hands shook. And for the first time ever, she didn't hide it. Because this wasn't about perfection anymore, it was about redemption. She lifted her eye to the scope, knowing exactly what this second shot would cost her. The second round slid into place with a metallic click that sounded too loud, too final. Sopiha's pulse pounded in her ears, not with fear but with memory, that she hadn't fired a second shot since the day everything broke. Back then, she'd hesitated. Back then, someone else paid the price. Not today. She pressed her cheek against the stock. But the rifle felt different now, heavier, colder, like it understood the weight of what she was about to do. Wind shifted again. The mirage thickened, bending the ridge like a warped reflection. Come on, think, feel. She inhaled through her nose, letting the desert air burn her lungs. Her father's voice returned, faint but steady. A second shot isn't a failure, it's a decision. She steadied her breathing, but the ridge was no longer still. The armored vehicle shuddered violently, struggling against the partial damage from her first hit. Its weapon barrel hummed, charging a low vibrating growl rolling across the desert. 30 seconds, maybe less. General Marin barked orders behind her. Brenner's voice trembled. Sopiha, look at me. You don't have to make up for the past here. Just come back. She didn't turn. This wasn't about going back, it was about going forward. She adjusted windage again, compensated for the mirage, calculated thermal drift. None of it was enough. The vehicle's movement made the shot nearly impossible. Every variable slipped in and out of predictability. Even her instincts struggled to see through the instability. Her hands tightened around the rifle. Trust the pattern, not the conditions. She exhaled slowly, her vision steadied, and suddenly, impossibility aligned. A narrow gap in the vehicle's armor exposed the power core, a gap that existed for exactly 1 second between rotations. She counted in her mind. 3, 2, 1. The opening flashed into view. She pulled the trigger. The sound tore through the bass, louder than the first, as if the world itself leaned forward in anticipation. The bullet soared, carving its impossible arc with terrifying grace. Sophia didn't blink, didn't breathe. The ridge flashed white. The vehicle jolted violently, then erupted into a thunderous bloom of smoke and flame. The desert wind carried the shockwave to the base, a warm, rolling breath of victory behind her. Soldiers erupted in gasps, shouts, disbelief. General Marin let out a laugh that cracked like breaking stone. Brenner sank to his knees, hands pressed to his forehead. And Sopiha didn't move. Her hands were still on the rifle, her face unreadable, her breath a trembling break in the silence, because she knew something no one else knew. Yet, that second shot, the one she never wanted to take, had awakened something inside her. She wasn't ready to face something she feared more than missing. Night fell over the base like a heavy curtain, dimming the chaos into a hush of exhausted relief. The ridge still smoldered in the distance, a dark silhouette against the fading light, ruined, silent, harmless. Inside the operations yard, soldiers celebrated with an exhausted kind of awe. 2 shots, from that distance. She saved the whole base. But Sophia stood apart from it, the weight of the rifle still echoing through her bones. Not the recoil, the meaning. She stared at her hands, the faint tremor still there. The tremor wasn't fear, it was memory unlocking. Brenner approached her slowly, as if she were both fragile and dangerous. You did it, he whispered. But you're shaken. Why? She swallowed. The truth pressed against her ribcage like a rising tide. The day I quit, she said, voice thin. My first shot missed. Everyone knows that, but what no one knew was, I didn't miscalculate. Brenner froze. Sopiha's gaze drifted to the ridge, lit faintly by moonlight. I hesitated, she whispered. Not because I doubted the shot, but because I doubted myself. I saw the target, I saw the risk, and I saw what it meant if I succeeded. I couldn't handle the weight of knowing I held someone's life in my hands. Her breath trembled. I froze, just long enough for someone else to get hit. Brenner's face softened, the anger draining away. You carried that alone. All this time, the desert wind brushed past them, carrying a soft, low hum that felt almost like forgiveness. Brenner stepped closer. And today, why didn't you freeze today? Sopiha closed her eyes. Because today, I wasn't thinking about myself. A breath, a realization, a release. I took the shot because lives depended on it. And for the first time in years, I understood that the weight of responsibility isn't something to fear. It's something to honor. She opened her eyes. The tremor in her hands was fading. The second shot didn't break me, she said softly. It woke me. Brenner exhaled, relief overtaking his tension. You found your meaning again. Sopiha shook her head gently. Double quotes. No, I didn't find it. She looked toward the ruins on the ridge. Steady. Calm. Resolute. I chose it.